You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, your Star Trek The Next Generation companion. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching The Loss. It was written by Hilary J. Bader and Alan J. Adler and Vanessa Green, with a story by Hilary J. Bader. It was directed by Chip Chalmers and first aired the week of December 31st, 1990. James, what happens in this one?
Following some unusual sensor readings, the Enterprise finds it is unable to resume its course, with both warp and impulse engines failing to have any impact on the ship's new course towards a weird purple thing that will probably crush them. Meanwhile, Counsellor Troi experiences extreme pain and soon realises she has lost her empathic abilities. From this point forward, she's horrible to everyone, including Riker, Crusher, and Picard, and then patronising to Guinan. She even hands in her resignation, but of course, what ship could cope without a therapist? It is only with Troi's insight that the crew are able to solve the sci-fi problem of the week. Some two-dimensional beings are dragging the ship towards their favourite part of space, and once their needs are understood, the ship can break away and Troi regains her vague magic powers.
Well, Alex, you've never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
So, before the episode, I thought I'd treat myself, it's a weird form of treat, but to watching the episode promo before, as the Blu-ray facilitates. The promo basically involves a voiceover going, "This week on Star Trek The Next Generation," and then a lot of Troi sort of going onto her knees with her hands at her head going, "Ah!" and then cutting to someone like Picard saying, "But Counselor, we need you." "Ah, I can't function, but we really need your help." Ah. It really encapsulates the episode, doesn't it? You know, when I came home from work this evening, I came home just in time to see my son shit himself in the bath. I feel it was a more engaging experience. He's 28 years old.
It's hard to know what to say.
Oh, I've got one.
I'm at a loss of things to say. See what I did there. Loss.
Good.
This is one of those weird episodes where I have absolutely no memory of it, except for the fact that there was an episode at some point where Troi loses her powers. So it's
I envy you, Wesley Crusher.
It's kind of like watching the episodes new.
What a marvellous experience that must have been for you.
So basically, we get the pleasure of experiencing the utterly bland and forgettable and not very good episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially.
I understand what they're trying to do. Because what this episode is trying to do is, one, give a vehicle to Troi, which is something the series is not very good at. And two, good, it's not a love story. Kudos for that. Well done, everyone. Yeah, took your female character and thought, let's define her on her own basis. But it's trying to be the science fiction disability. What if I suddenly became blind? And yet, there is nothing good here. It doesn't have any value. It doesn't give you any insight. And perhaps the problem is her ability is so nebulous. We don't even really understand it, what she feels and how she experiences it and what that means.
I'd also add on to that it's weirdly, considering what the skill is, it's difficult to feel empathy with it because it's a skill that we all would feel would be horribly intrusive in our lives. You know, as being on the receiving end of someone else that had that skill. And it does sort of mean that whole disabled plot sort of gets a bit fumbled. While LeVar Burton looks on in the background going, hang on, so what's my character for again?
It didn't feel like, to me, as much of an analogy to a disability. It felt like the generic kind of thing they do in pretty much every superhero TV show, where they take the superhero and they lose their powers. You know, happens to Buffy, it happens to Superman, it happens to every single superhero at some point.
Right. And you understand that because, Buffy doesn't have any strength, so she is just like an ordinary teenage girl and she can't fight the vampires, she is overpowered by them. Superman can no longer fly, he can feel pain, he can cut himself shaving. And in this, what do we get? Is Troi having a therapy session with someone with the most obvious problem of the week and just going, I don't know. And also in a meeting is like, are they intelligent? And then she just goes, what's that meant to mean? What are you implying? And it was like, nobody was asking you. Like, literally no one was asking you. Sometimes you can't tell if it's someone in the room, but other times you can tell, like, planet a million miles away. Whatever.
To be fair, Geordie was a bit bitchy in that scene.
But I also think I agree as well on the Geordie front. It's like, should there not be some kind of scene here? And obviously we don't want to define Geordie by him being blind.
Wait. Geordie's blind.
I read that somewhere. I might be wrong. I'm not sure.
First Contact, ringing out a joke since 12 now? It's been a very long time.
The way they handle the character in this episode, she's just hateful. She's just horrible. And I get that they're trying to get a level of frustration across, but I just like... It's just like, I have no sympathy for you. And again, I think it is because of that power. And it's that thing Riker says as well, which it just sort of hits the nail on the head. It's like, you're going to every situation with a superiority, knowing how someone's feeling, and basically you take pleasure in that. And that's a bit sort of, we're not okay with that, basically.
I think there is a problem of this episode having its cake and eating it at the same time, which is that it is trying to make that overt case about a disability. I mean, it outright has Troi saying, "I am disabled," and there are some bits in that I thought could be horribly fumbled and are done better than I expected, but we'll come to those. However, at the same time, it's then also having that other scene that you mentioned just there with Riker saying, no, your skill, well, it's kind of a dick move, really, a lot of the time, isn't it? So it's asking you to feel sorry for her while also going, yeah, bloody good she can't do that anymore. It's just such a weird ask of the audience.
Yeah, so let's, now we're many minutes into the episode, go right back to the start. And this therapy session with the
creepiest widow,
Ensign Janet Brooks. I don't think she is the creepiest. Now we'll get to this in a moment. Now she is basically, I'm fine, everything's fine, it's fine. And actually that's kind of what we're told that the people in the future, the Gene Roddenberry people, have accepted death as an everyday part of life and just move on. I think we saw that in the other episode where the child lost his parents, and you're supposed to sort of be okay, because that's how that episode has to be written. How are you okay? But actually, in the weird cult of the Federation, oh no, it turns out you're not okay, and you're still human, and you have emotions, but you're supposed to be, and you just get rid of all the possessions and don't deal with anything and repress everything, except Troi, who apparently keeps the possessions of all the dead crew members, even after they've been cleared out.
Now, she's running some kind of racket, isn't she? I mean, it's like when you go to a boot fair and you see the vans with home clearance marked on, you can clearly tell they've just been around the nearest person that's died's house, and they're just selling all of their wares. Why did I ask them to take away all of the things? Well, luckily for you, I have this box that I took. Oh, Diana, it's so thoughtful. I've also got several gold teeth, a stash of cash.
But I guess the point of this scene is to set it up as Counsellor Troi is the best counsellor in the world. Isn't she amazing? Look, she's got this difficult case and she's managed to solve it. Look at her empathy. And actually, in that you don't get any sense of empathy. She just makes a woman cry, basically. And, like, with a really weird technique, while seeming really distant. Like, the opposite of empathetic, as in just, like, really odd.
To be fair, she was suppressing her emotions, and she shouldn't have been. And it is that thing of, they've set up this perfect, enlightened future where everybody handles death so much better. And I actually really loved the fact that they've said, no, they don't handle it better. They're suppressing. They need to. They need to react better to death, and it's a message that can work to us now. If they handle death in a better way in the future, and if they still have trouble handling death, then that sends a positive message to people watching now. Whereas the horrible kind of everyone just moves on after death, I don't like that. I was never comfortable with that.
Well, I think that's really interesting, though, in that they're addressing that. And I think that's Michael Piller sort of going, okay, this is how we've set up that future. It's the most interesting thing in the episode, perhaps, but I think the writing and the performance from Ensign Janet Brooks, and I'm sorry, Kim Braden, to criticise you. It might just be the writing and the direction.
No, she's dreadful.
None of that is good. It's just really... It's just weird.
I mean, it's the haunting stare of a serial killer. I'm fine. Mark died last year, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm perfectly over it. I mean, I was the one who killed him, but, I'm perfectly fine and over it. But then it goes like a sketch, doesn't it? I mean, it's just... I'm perfectly fine. I'm happy. I'm glad he's dead. But are you really? No, I'm not. I'm a mess. I just can't cope. It seems like you might not be coping. Actually, no, I'm coping fine. What? It's just awful. There's no other way of describing it. I mean, it's just bad.
Has she been having a year of therapy sessions?
How long she had that box locked away for? Maybe this session.
This is the culmination of, 52 weeks of meeting with Troi.
So, does she have something in that safe for everyone that comes in? If Picard comes in, does she have a bottle of wine from the vineyard that she can just pull out at an opportune moment, but he's never cracked?
When he comes in just with the commissioning of the Enterprise E, and she goes, I've got one of Renee's sweaters.
I also don't understand it. Her reaction was, "Oh, they didn't take everything." Oh, Diana, thank you. Not, what the hell are you doing with that?
It's just, I don't know. And actually, the thing is, maybe around this period, like, you do get other TV shows that have characters going into therapy, and usually it's insightful and. It's not necessarily from the point of view of the therapist, but certainly, the mid-90s onwards, you'd stuff like ER, the lead characters going to therapy, you'd stuff like Ally McBeal. Maybe it's more towards the end of that decade, but it just feels like, oh, therapy is a thing we've heard of, we better write a scene, but it feels very underwritten and very just basic. It's not even a first draft, because it's just like, it's a this is the best we can do draft, and I don't know where to go from here. At no point is it the case that Troi has showed how her empathy is useful, because any therapist could have gone, you're suppressing your emotions, you need to deal with that. Any human could have done that, and at no point at the start of the episode is she like saving the ship with her empathy. And in fact, at no point in the series really has she done anything useful, other than when an angry person comes on the screen and she goes, I sense he's angry. So it's that element of it just doesn't click.
Although that's a weird angle that they are consciously trying to play in this, where they're trying to make the point of, but you don't need this to do your job. To which her reaction is, you may not think I need it, but as far as I'm concerned, I do, and spare me the fake sympathy. And actually, that's the part of things that I like, is the element of the episode that's trying to deal with other people's reactions to someone that's suddenly developed a disability. But it doesn't then sort of stay with that message. It then sort of does still continue with the, yeah, but you could just get on with it. And it's all very confused.
But anyway, we move on to the main plot. There's a sort of sensory thing that's there, and then it's not there, and then the ship can't go to warp, and it's being dragged in a direction it doesn't want to go in.
I assume the money ran out.
It's very perfunctory. It's a strange one, isn't it? Because we do talk a bit about A plots and B plots, and this is an A plot where basically a thing is happening, but also nobody really has anything to do.
Well, this isn't really the A plot. Troi is the A plot. It's just that the B plot causes the A plot. But it's weird that the B plot is so kind of just short and barely anything happens. They just get dragged across space for a bit, try to go to warp, and then just say, "Oh, Troi, have you got any ideas?" And that's it. and yet the Troi element of the episode, the A plot, feels like nothing happened there either. Like it only feels like 5 scenes where Troi goes and sees Picard, Troi goes and gets angry at Crusher, Riker gets angry at Troi, Guinan tries to convince Troi that she wants her job, Troi saves the day, and that's the episode. It's 5 scenes.
Not to constantly draw parallels with a young child, but again, before this recording, I was watching In the Night Garden with my son, and
your references have changed.
Yeah, they really have. The plot of that episode,
Piggle lost his empathic powers.
it involved Upsy Daisy giving Piggle her special stone. Piggle put it down, couldn't remember where it was, went looking for it. Macca Packa found it, gave it to Piggle, who returned it to Upsy Daisy, and then everyone went to bed. And I feel somehow more happened in that plot.
It also suffers from what I call the Voyager problem, in that you've got a small personal story, which is occupying the A plot, and then this really big thing happening, and I know it's not a really big thing, but it's more significant in that it's going to kill everyone. And it's sort of in the background, and we're not that interested in it, and it's just like we sort of go to it, and it's like everyone's actually more concerned that Troy's in a bit of a mood than the fact that 1,000 people are about to get crushed to death. And the episode doesn't prioritise it, and it is that whole thing, the argument they made with the episode Family, where it's they wanted to have a sci-fi plot on the ship as well, but they were like, no, this is a character thing about Picard, and this is a character thing about Troi, but I don't care about the character thing about Troi, but there's also a bigger thing happening on the ship, which actually I should be more interested in, but I'm also not interested in, because it's ultimately not that interesting, although I am quite interested in, there's 2-dimensional beings. Okay, that's quite a cool idea, I like that, and I also like that they did a little cartoon of the Enterprise on the screen.
It's all... The problem is, it's a lot of tell and very little show. And so much of the tell is just wrapped up in technobabble for the sake of technobabble. It just... You can follow it. I'm not pretending that it's impenetrable, but it's very hard to engage with it.
Yes, it's this invisible thing is happening, and we're moving very slowly, and then there's a purple line on the screen, and we're like, oh.
Yeah. This would have worked better if there was no peril. if they just happened to be going through space and suddenly Troi lost her powers, and they didn't know what the cause of it was, and then the B plot could have been them investigating the area of space to see if there's a reason, whereas the A plot could have been Troi not having her powers, and them not knowing if it is just because Troi is half human, or whether it was for some reason something in space, and then at the end of the episode they could have resolved it by finding out it was something in space that caused it.
I mean, I don't want to make comparisons to other shows. Actually, of course I do. But there's an episode of The Orville where the chief of security loses her super strength, and that is far more engaging and interesting than this, and actually gives you far more insight into a character that isn't particularly well drawn either. It feels like a sort of lack of ideas, mid-season, nothing script. What do we do with Troi is the question. And Michael Piller even says that. It's anytime there's an episode of Troi, somebody pitches, let's have her lose her powers. As I imagine people pitch, let's make Data become human. So it's sort of like this is the most basic plot we can do with this character. And it turns out there's not that much interesting to explore there either.
Well, I feel like the plot they were heading for is one of Troi loses her powers, but can she continue with her job? It's a journey of discovery for her to find out that it's not her powers that made her who she is, it's her. But quite rightly, because they're drawing a disability parallel, they have to draw back from that, which is where you get back to that scene we were talking about with Picard and saying, spare me the anecdote, where he's... I mean, if we are taking it purely as a disability analogy, and we are being asked to, it is quite patronising. And certainly that whole thing of, they say some man loses his sight and his hearing gets better and stuff. It's right that they pull away from where it feels like it's going. However, it does mean that for the plot of the episode, it just sort of grinds to a halt, and then they have to wrap it up.
Does it feel a bit off, though? Like, everything feels a bit off. I don't really recognise this version of Picard that was stumbling to sort of try and deal with Troi as she was having a meltdown. I feel his reaction would be a bit more like in Generations, when he shouts at Data, just that it doesn't matter what you're going through, just get on with your duties. And that feels like a more genuine reaction.
I'd love that scene in his office if he just was telling Troi that she could get past this and she'd be fine. But while he did it, he just drove around the office in a dune buggy.
Our other joke making an appearance, I see. I think another thing. So when she gets her bad headache, she calls for Beverly and she says, "Oh, there's stuff happening all over the ship. I'll get with you as soon as I can." And you think, you're not the only doctor, surely. And then later on, she's going on about, there's loads of therapists on this ship. You should go and talk to one of them. And you're just like, why are there so many therapists and only one doctor? What kind of ship is this?
It's Riker's behaviour. It just creates an inordinate need for therapists throughout the ship, as is evidenced by his conduct in this episode.
Okay, yeah, I want to talk about Riker. So we've got basically
creepy Riker.
Creepy Riker. But so we have the scene, I guess, the first scene where he goes to her and she pushes him away, and he's like, "I've never seen you so angry." And then is it another scene where he goes to see her again, and he goes, "Oh, you're all regal, you think you're better than all of us, and I hate you." And then they have a cuddle. And then at the end, they're having a chat, and he was like, "I'm glad you're back." And then he tries to kiss her for some reason that I can't work out. Is that just sort of his go-to move after any 5-minute situation, sitting down opposite a woman?
I also quite enjoyed when he goes to hug her and she says, "Is this how you treat all of your staffing problems?" And he makes a joke of it and says, "Well, yeah, it works particularly well on Geordie and Worf." But this is how you solve all your problems. You can make light of it, but this is exactly what you do.
And then, of course, you've got the other scenes with Beverly where Troi is just and you don't want to gender language, but is just an utter bitch to her, and and it's acknowledged later. It's like, oh, I was awful to her, and it just feels it's nice to actually see a character being a dick, like in Star Trek, because you don't get that very often. But there's no way into how she's feeling. I can't identify, and I know not everything has to be relatable, but it just feels like I don't even understand. So,
well, she's a dick to everyone until she goes and sees Guinan, and Guinan outdicks her. I can't. I'm disabled. I can't do my job anymore. Oh, maybe I'll do your job. What?
Guinan's sort of her usual. I'm a bit arch and a bit funny and a bit weird, and I'm just going to sort of talk down to you, but sort of talk at you. And it's just like, I'm a barman, I'm pretty wise, and I don't know.
It's fine. She's just telling Troi that... She's just basically trying to get Troi to realise that she does have abilities outside of her empathic powers that help her be a therapist.
But because of the parallels that we have drawn earlier with disability, does that start to become slightly condescending? I really can't decide, because on one hand, again, if we're being asked to draw those parallels, you don't want to say, oh, you've lost this ability that seems key to your job, well, you can just get by doing something else instead, because that's pretty condescending. Equally, on the other side of things, to say, oh no, she has lost it, so she must never do anything related to this job again, is also quite condescending. It's quite a minefield, one that I feel that the show was completely ill-equipped to take on.
But the thing is, it's not saying either of those things. It's saying she's lost this key ability, but she has all these other abilities. She is more talented than just one superpower that makes her good at a job. And it's that whole scene is about making her realise that she is more talented and that there is more to being a therapist than just one little magic power.
I guess, again, this comes back to what we started everything out with. It gets complicated because of the power that we're dealing with. And that's where, when you start drawing those parallels, it all gets a bit hazy. Because if we were talking about sight, then it would be a very different case. And then that's exactly where it feels weird not to utilise Geordie in any regard here.
Do you know, I think this is one episode where it might have been interesting to actually have Luxana in it. And I know probably if you're doing a Troi episode, you want to say, oh, you can do one without her mother in it. But I think that relationship and that response, where it is all about her being empathic and her sort of thinking she's too good to be in Starfleet and all that kind of baggage, that might have brought something to it. How does another empath then respond to one who has lost that power? Does it completely change the dynamic of that relationship? Because that's someone who's operating on that level, whereas the other characters are kind of operating in a slightly different sort of relationship to her, in that, they don't get anything out of that. She just always is experiencing other things from them. And I love some of the lines in this episode, which are just, I don't know why they're not memes. All of you are blank to me. And it's like, yeah, I know that feeling. I understand that when I'm in a room with other people. But, yeah, she says a few things which are just kind of harsh. And
with all due respect, Captain, you have no idea what you are talking about.
You've got your head stuck up your big fat arse.
I look around me and all I see are surfaces without depth. Yep. Been there. Yeah, so there's all that. And then I think there's the other problem in that I don't feel we really know the character of Troi that well.
Oh, I know something about her. She's got empathic powers.
Oh.
God, imagine if the plot had focused on that.
I actually think this would have been a more interesting episode if it wasn't about her losing her empathic powers, but actually about her gaining full Betazoid empathic powers, so she could read people's minds, and how she reacted to suddenly being basically full Betazoid.
So the resolution, I guess it brings the plot strands together again, as we knew it would, and Counsellor Troi, we need you to save the day by going and talking to Data.
It's embarrassing. It's not even writing, it's notes.
We need to create a situation where Troi is the only person that can solve the problem, and therefore she gets her confidence back and understands that there's more to her than her empathy. But when it's kind of dealing with space termites, basically, and it's like, well, every creature has a need and a desire, and we just have to understand that they have instincts. And I feel like in any other episode, all of this would have been tried already. You know, they're going towards the thing. Oh, can we replicate the thing? Oh, we can. That's good. Sorted. It feels like it didn't really need Troi to solve that particular problem, and that's not necessarily something we've seen her doing in any other episode or ever will again. It's very unnatural.
They have the real resolution, which is the widow coming to her and saying, you know, that she did help, Troi did help even without her empathic powers. That's the victory for Troi, the moment where she realises she's more than just her empathic powers. The sci-fi element of it is completely unnecessary.
It is, but you can't help but watch that scene without thinking that at that point Troy's going to go, but was I right? And then she turns around and goes, no, you weren't, it was terrible. And just does another 180. And we just get stuck in this endless loop.
I think we're done. Let's go talk about not very much in Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Well, this is the first episode without Will Wheaton appearing as a series regular, and I think the rest of the crew probably envied him that. So, Michael Piller opined... I don't have a voice for Michael Piller. I mean, he's dead and I liked him. Michael...
How about we just go French?
Michael Piller opined, it was a very different story to get right. I felt the script was adequate. It's not one of my favourites. The problem in Conception is that you have a phenomenon that nobody can identify with. We said, this is our bland show, but we can't do a bland show like other shows.
That accent is worryingly becoming offensive.
Well, everyone has to have a distinct voice.
You may be wondering what happened to Janet Brooks's husband. Well, keep wondering, because there has never been a spin-off novel which has dealt with what happened to her husband. Which, considering that Argyle, Chief Engineer Argyle, got continuing adventures in the novels, nobody thought, somebody died on the Enterprise, let's do a novel about that. But there is a little bit more information about Janet Brooks from spin-off media.
Oh, great.
Following the episode The Loss, Brooks remained aboard the Enterprise D until her destruction on Viridian 3 in 2371. That is how Memory Beta phrases it.
Well, I mean, either could be true. We just don't know the losses of that incident.
It's definitely not referring to Janet Brooks, because she goes on to be transferred to the Enterprise E.
Oh, good. Do we see her on the Enterprise E ever?
No.
Did you notice there's a new person on the bridge? Maybe they're not new, but they're sitting in Wesley's chair, and it's Tess Allenby. So they got a few lines, actually. I mean, it's all just, I'm pushing the buttons, but it was nice to see her.
I did notice. Yes, I did notice. And I thought, who the hell are you? And then I just thought about it a bit more, and I went, extra. turning to the sadist sonnet that is the Nitpicker's Guide, not much to go on this time round. A couple of entries, though. Under the Great Lines section, Phil Farrand has chosen, "We're on equal footing now." I mean, it's there. I wouldn't necessarily say it's great. I mean, I struggle to go as far as memorable, but, okay, slim pickings. He's got to choose something. He has built a format. He does, however, go on in Equipment Oddities, and I feel he's perhaps revealing a bit more about himself than he wants to. He says, when Troi experiences intense pain caused by the onset of the colony, she needs to call Dr. Crusher. She reaches up, taps her badge, talks to Crusher, and taps on her badge to end the conversation. Isn't this proof that individuals must tap their badges to begin conversations? No one in intense pain takes extra steps to call for help.
As he knows from experience.
I think he just brings out the skulls in a box when people come over, like Troi.
They didn't take any extra steps when they called for help.
This was your husband.
I noticed ultimately they used the deflector dish to solve their problem. Now, it appears every science fiction technical problem can be solved using a deflector dish. Why do they never do it first? Why is it always the last thing they try?
Budget.
It costs a lot to use the deflector dish. They don't want to use it too much. It's like, I don't really want to put the heating on. I'd rather just put a blanket on. But, if I really have to, I'll switch on the heating. The deflector dish is the heating of the Enterprise.
Occasionally we look at our reference guides, and by reference guides I mean the 4 books and Memory Alpha that we tend to turn to for every episode. And I do question the writers, and sometimes you look at it and go, these are comments from a different time. Looking at Star Trek 365, and I mean that's a book from 2012, it does go through how the episode deals with the 5 stages of grief before concluding, interestingly, Troi reaches the final steps of acceptance only after she has regained her empathic abilities. Well, it's easy to be gracious and say nice things about being human when you're so much more than human, isn't it? Would she have reached acceptance without regaining her powers? Quite possibly, so long as her human friends kept her plied with chocolate.
Because Troi likes chocolates. That's the...
But did you notice in her hour of need, she didn't go to chocolate for comfort?
She didn't, no. They've forgotten her one character trait.
Well, that was certainly another episode. We enjoyed talking about it, and I hope you enjoyed listening to. We'll be back again when we'll be talking about Data's Day, so do join us for that. But until then, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I've just had a thought, by the way, on the topic of is there more than one doctor on the Enterprise. They have puppies on board ship, so you would assume they have a vet on board.
That's a fair point.
If they do have a vet, the vet could have taken on some of the responsibility. It's an emergency situation.
And this is what we're talking about. Yes. Does anyone have anything else to say other than pondering, does the vet have a nurse? And if so, is there like an animal sick bay, or what does that get called?
I hope that there is an animal sick bay. I like the idea that Wesley gets hurt and then he accidentally goes to the wrong sick bay and he just comes onto the bridge with a big cone around his neck.